Hello, everyone. My name is Arun, and I'm solutions architect with one of the best organization in the world, Rackspace Technologies. And these are my views. And today we are going to talk about design for Azure SQL managed instance. Uh, I've shared my screen, and if you can see my screen, you'll find a lot of stuff that we're going to talk about one by one. You're going to talk uh, about, right? It says about. We'll talk generalized idea what it is regarding Azure SQL MI. A lot is already covered in the previous one. Then we'll talk about some key features and the purchasing model and some security features. Pardon my spelling, security features. All right, so let's start with the about. Azure SQL Managed Instance is a PaaS deployment option of Azure SQL. We all know that. It provides an instance of SQL Server, but removes much of the overhead of managing a virtual machine. That's what PaaS means, right? And most of the features available in SQL Server are available in SQL Managed Instance. And as they say, it is almost 100% compatible with SQL on a VM. So this is the first choice whenever we are migrating from on-prem to Azure in regards of the SQL, of course. Then SQL managed instance is ideal for customers who want to use instance scope features and want to move to Azure without re-architecting their application. That's what I was explaining, right? Now, SQL managed instance code features include SQL Server Agent, Service Broker, Common Language Runtime (CLR), database, uh, linked servers, distributed transactions, machine learning services, those kind of features. And as I said, SQL managed instance has near 100% compatibility with the latest SQL Server Enterprise Edition database engine, always providing a native virtual network implementation. It's a great isolation, good for security, and business model favorable for existing SQL Server customers. So SQL Managed Instance allows existing SQL Server customers to lift and shift their on-prem applications to the cloud with minimal application and databases changes. As I said at the beginning, while highlighting it 100%, almost 100% compatible, because there are a few features which are not supported. We'll see that. At the same time, SQL MI preserves all PaaS capabilities, right? Like automatic patching, version update, backups, HA, high availability, a geo application that drastically reduce management overhead, and TCO, of course. SQL MI combines the best features that are available both in Azure SQL DB and the SQL Server database engine. In previous video, we talked about Azure SQL DB and architecture and other stuff. A lot is similar in MI as well. For example, purchasing model. We'll come to the purchasing model in a few minutes. Before that, let's try to dig some key features. So the very first is we have mentioned a couple of times PaaS surveys, PaaS deployment, benefits of the PaaS. So let's dig one more time. What are those benefits? We all know there is no hardware purchasing and management, no management overhead for managing underlying infrastructure, quick provisioning and service scaling, automated patching and version upgrade, integration with other PaaS data services. And the beauty of this MI is it is a PaaS. PaaS means public service. However, we are deploying this in a virtual network. So we are getting the private IP addresses. Now, the BCDR, what all benefits are we getting in the business continuity? The very first is 99.99% of uptime SLA, built-in high availability. You need not to spin up anything for HA. Data protected with automated backups, custom configurable backup retention period as well, user initiated backups, just like Azure backups, point in time database restore capability, and auto failure groups that should be the part of uh, disaster recovery, right? You can utilize this feature to create your DR plans. Now let's see some security and compliance features. Uh, the very first we can add here is the isolated environment, because we deploy this in a virtual network. TDE, which is transparent data encryption. Azure Active Authentication, because you can integrate this with the Azure Active Directory. It adheres to compliance standards such as Azure SQL DB, SQL auditing, ATP, which is advanced threat protection, that will cover a little more in deep in the security features. Now, what are the features which are not supported? Well, in case your on-premises SQL on-prem, SQL on VM, if they're using SSIS or SSRS, then of course those things cannot be supported by this MI. However, for SSIS, we have Data Factory. For SSRS, you can have BI. SSAS is also not supported. That we have Synapse in Azure for that. So yeah, if these are the services that you're using, then of course you need to think to distribute those services by utilizing different other services in cloud. Now let's see the V core model, the purchasing model. This is exactly the same model that we had in Azure SQL DB, except we do not have hyperscale here. We did mention that in the previous video. So the vCore based purchasing model for SQL MI gives you flexibility, control, transparency, and a straightforward way to translate on-prem workload requirement to the cloud. This model allows you to change compute memory and storage based upon your workload needs. All right, now I should not go and talk about architecture because it has already been covered for the service tiers. Like even in SQL MI, we have general purpose and business critical. vCore model also eligible for up to 55% savings with Azure hybrid benefit for SQL Server. It's a very good to mention. It is a lucrative offer, which we supposed to mention always when we talk to the customer. If they have some software assurance and the licenses, then of course they can harvest the benefit of AHB, Azure hybrid benefits. Now, service tier, as we have already covered, general purpose, designed for applications with typical performance and IO latency requirements, and business critical, designed for applications with low IO latency requirement and minimal impact of underlying maintenance operation on the workload. That directly connects with the architecture, and same architecture that we have already discussed. Both service tiers guarantee 99.99% of availability and enable you to independently select storage size and compute capacity. Now let's dig into security features, as I mentioned. So the very first is SQL managed instance auditing, which tracks database events and writes them to an audit log file placed in Azure storage account. Auditing can help you maintain regulatory compliance, understand database activity, and gain insight into discrepancies and anomalies that could indicate business concern or suspected security violations. Encryption, data encryption in motion. SQL managed instance secure your data by providing encryption for data in motion using transport layer security. In addition to TLS, SQL MI offers protection of sensitive data in flight, at rest, and during query processing with always encrypted. Now, ATP is advanced threat protection. ATP complements auditing by providing an additional layer of security intelligence built into the service that detects unusual and potentially harmful attempts to access or exploit databases. Uh, you are alerted about suspicious activities, potential vulnerabilities, and SQL injection attacks, as well as anomalies, database access patterns. ATP alerts can be viewed from Defender for Cloud. They provide details of suspicious activity and recommend actions on how to investigate and mitigate the threat. Then data masking. Well, data masking, as the name says, that's what it is. It masks the data, limits sensitive data exposure by masking it to non-privileged users. Then row level security, or RLS, enables you to control access to rows in a DB in a database table based on the characteristics of the user executing a query, which means the access level, or where or what access or the user is belong to. For example, ensuring that workers can access only the data rows that belong to their department, or restricting a data access to only the relevant data. TDE encrypts SQL MI data files, known as encrypting data at rest. TDE performs real-time IO encryption and decryption of the data in log files. TDE is proven encryption at rest technology in SQL Server that is required by many compliance standards to protect against theft of storage media. Now, we have mentioned a lot of times SQL MI is a wonderful option for the lift and shift, or when you're migrating from on-prem to Azure. So migration of an encrypted DB or database to SQL MI is supported through Azure Database Migration Services or Native Restore. If you plan to migrate an encrypted database using Native Restore, migration of the existing TDE certificate from the SQL Server instance to SQL MI is a required step, right? Does make sense, okay? Yeah. So if your workload requires storage size greater than the available resource limits of for Azure SQL MI, if you are guessing hyperscale, then of course you are correct. Consider the Azure SQL DB hyperscale service tier. Now there is two other wonderful options or features that we have in SQL MI I would like to talk about. The very first is instance pools. Yes, it is different from Elastic Pool, but it is the feature of MI. So instance pools in Azure SQL MI provides a convenient and cost-efficient way to migrate smaller SQL Server instance to the cloud at scale. Instance pools allows you to pre-provision compute resources according to your total migration requirements. You can then deploy several individual managed instances up to your pre-provision compute level. For example, this will clear this up. If you pre-provision 8 vCores, you can deploy 2 vCore and 1 4 vCore instance, and then migrate databases into these instances. Prior to instance pools being available, smaller and less compute intensive workloads would often have to be consolidated into a larger managed instance when migrating to the cloud, but no more because of instance pools. And yes, I did mention auto failover group in BCDR, so just wanted to highlight this. It's a wonderful feature over your application. So this auto failover group feature allows you to manage the replication and failover of a group of databases on a server or all user databases in a managed instance to another Azure region. It is a declarative abstraction on top of the active geo-replication feature, designed to simplify deployment and management of geo-replicated database at scale. Well, yeah, I think that's it. That's all about SQL MI in this particular module. Well, thank you for watching, and you guys have a good day.